Welcome to another edition of, what are we calling ourselves, Mark?
Okay, I've made my mind up on this. It's going to be a very liberal life. Okay, can we settle on that, Lembit? Or are you going to change your mind again?
I don't really know. Why don't you call it one thing and I'll call it something else?
Well, I'll call it the Mark Oaten Show then.
Yeah, good luck with that, Mark. Yeah, all right. Well, welcome to Something to Do with Liberalism, everybody. With me, Lembit Öpik, and
me, Mark Oaten,
where we find the facts and talk about this in a liberal, or perhaps I would say libertarian way, without getting too heavy on the party politics. You may have noticed that there have been various problems facing the current Labour government. Yes, you elected them. I didn't vote for them, but some of you did. And they seem to be in trouble with the NHS and with the economy. What else are they suffering on, Mark?
I mean, they're failing to get to grips with the issue about immigration. I would say if you look at nearly every sort of single indicator about trust in politics, they've failed to restore that in the way they said they would after so many years of conservative mistrust. So, you know, what I want to do in this show is have an analysis of each of the various indicators about whether or not this country is broken or not, and see exactly where Labour can be judged. And then the big question is, who can fix it? And are Reform, who are ahead in the opinion polls, the solution to this problem? Because at the moment, it seems to me that none of the old mainstream political parties are offering a solution to what's happening at the moment. So I'm interested to analyse not only what is broken about this country, but also whether Reform, because they're ahead in the opinion polls, are actually up to the job of fixing it.
It's good choice of subjects there, I think. Let's start with the most obvious one, and that's the migrant crisis, a crisis which hasn't just started, but is at record levels after the great new Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, said, I'm going to get it under control. Well, he hasn't got it under control. In fact, the cross-channel migrants in those little rubber boats are at a record level. And that's just really a litmus test. It's just an indicator of the far larger problem facing the UK. Let's look at this clip here, Mark, which pretty much summarizes any number of clips which we could have had. Can we play the migrant clip, please?
The British government is desperate to stop a small boat loaded with dozens of people setting off across the channel. The French police didn't stop it leaving, but it was shadowed by this search and rescue vessel, here to observe, not obstruct. We follow the boat as it chugs slowly along the coast for an hour, and then it takes a surprise detour back towards the shore. A police vehicle comes to meet it, a helicopter arrives, but the boat never lands. Instead, 4 people, almost certainly part of the smuggling gang that arranged this crossing, jump out and wade back to the shoreline, as those left on board resume their journey. The 4 who leapt off are met by the French police, but they're barely questioned, let alone arrested, and within a minute they've walked off towards the dunes. Behind them, the frail, packed, slow-moving boat is on its way to Britain.
And that's the problem, Mark. You saw it there with your own eyes. The police in France aren't even arresting these people. This journalist we're watching there, he knew who they were. He knew what they were doing, but they just stand there and let this happen. And I actually hold the French police partly responsible.
I mean, I hold them very responsible for this. But look, at every single level, this is, first of all, a humanitarian crisis in the sense that people are risking their lives in this way. It is a shambolic example of
Sorry to interrupt you. Look at that. The French police are just staring, just watching.
It's a shambolic example of the French and the UK government's failure to get to grips with this. It is an incompetence of such high level that as an island of a proud history of being able to protect our borders, having this incredible island, having this incredible navy, we don't seem to be able to stop these rubber boats coming into the country. Now, look, whatever your views are on the issues of migration, immigration, asylum seekers, etc., just judge this at one level about whether it is competent. And the answer is absolutely not. This Labour government and the Tories before them failed to get a grip of this. And it is breathtaking that they are being defied by essentially people in rubber boats. What's gone wrong with this country? Our proud tradition of a navy being able to control things, and we can't stop this happening. It's breathtaking.
No one can tell me that disgraceful image we see there in the still is morally or logistically justifiable. The police just standing there watching these guys, almost all of them men of fighting age, wading into the water to come to Britain. Now, I guess, Mark, one of the reasons this is happening is because it's a hell of a lot easier for them, that's the French police, if these people all clear off and come and become our problem instead of theirs.
Well, of course it is, but it defies logic that there's been now, I don't know, something like 10 different announcements about new arrangements with the French. First of all, the French are going to take a much tougher stance. Then we're going to have cooperation between the French police and the UK police. Then we're going to have this one in, one out deal, which means we'll be able to send
one in, one out. Yeah.
I mean, none of this seems to work. Somebody somewhere has to get tough on this issue. And if the French are not prepared to actually manage their border, then we should just go in and do it for them, frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what we should do? We should get our people, our military, I suppose, to go there, tow them back, slash the boats beyond use, and clear off. So
yeah,
that they know.
And that may sound cruel, but it's not cruel, because what we're trying to do here is to stop the source, which are these individual boats, by wrecking them. And we're trying to stop individuals putting their lives at risk by coming across on the channel. Now, look, at the moment, the weather is good, and these crossings are able to happen without the tragedy of lives being lost. But come the winter time, I absolutely guarantee that individuals will be losing their lives as a result of these crossings. So it's an incompetent policy. It needs to have a firm hand taken on it. But also there's a humanitarian side to this as well. We are going to see this winter people dying, making attempts to cross the Channel Tunnel. It has to be resolved before then.
Yeah, there's an issue there as well, though, because they're taking a risk, but it's a small one. The percentage who make it is really high. The percentage who don't is really low. And on top of that, the RNLI are losing people. I spoke to someone yesterday whose friends have left the RNLI because they were so disgusted with the fact they were essentially being escorts to illegal immigrants. And I'm going to say something really direct here. Not one of those people in the boats has arrived here legally. By definition, they've broken the law to get here. And my feeling now is we should be saying anyone who arrives on those boats gets sent back regardless, because you started by breaking the law and therefore you're not respecting British values. I'd go further than that. Remember, my parents were immigrants, but I would say anyone can come here if they embrace British culture and they play their part. But if you don't embrace British culture, you don't play your part, then you're not welcome.
Well, I mean, Lembit, I think I just want to add a rider to that, in that, you know, if you have got a genuine case and you're fleeing persecution and you're a genuine asylum seeker, then I don't mind whether you accept British culture or not. We want to get you in. We want to make sure that you're safe. So from that perspective, I disagree with you there. What I do agree, of course, in terms of general migration, individuals coming over here to work, then yes, there has to be an acceptance of the British culture. Do you remember back in the day when we were both politicians, David Blunkett introduced his Britishness test, I think it was, that you would have to pass a number of questions. Well, I don't know whatever happened to that. I remember actually quite a few of us as MPs couldn't answer some of those questions. So that didn't work as an idea. And we've been struggling with this issue ever since. But, and here's the question I want to directly put to you. Why, if we are able, for example, in the famous fishing wars, we were able to bring our navy in. to manage our channel, if we felt that somebody was coming into our fishing area and taking our quota, why can we not bring the British Navy in over a period of 4 or 5 months to manage this situation and to protect our shores and protect these individuals from dying in these rubber dinghies? Where are the Navy? I don't understand it.
Well, yes, this is the same Navy and military that's meant to be able to protect the loser Zelensky across 1,400 miles of border that they can't even protect 20 miles of English Channel. The answer is contained in your question, in a sense, but totally impotent, because at the moment, your well-meaning comments about, oh, well, we've got to protect these people, I understand those, but the problem is we look like a soft touch. Yeah. Now, where I disagree with you on is this: if you are a legitimate asylum seeker, come to us in a legitimate way. You don't get in a boat and turn up on the shores of Dover and then run up through the dunes and into our world. That's not what you do. You go to, let's say, the British Embassy in Paris. Once they're in Paris, once you're in France, they can do that. Say, I'm claiming asylum. But they're not. Most of them are not like that. Come on. We may have messed up the Middle East, but most of the people are economic migrants, which once again, I understand is legitimate, but they know once they're here, they're probably going to stay.
Look, we're here, this programme, to analyse whether Britain is broken and where this Labour government has succeeded and failed. And on this first issue that we're analysing, immigration, it's a 0 out of 10 from me. They failed to get a grip of it. But I would say this, so did the Conservatives before them. The question is, would reform do any better? Now, one of the difficulties for Nigel Farage and his party is that the solution in part to this is to be able to work with the rest of Europe, because of course this is where the route is coming through. It's coming through mainland Europe through to France. There has to be a European solution to this. Will Farage be able to create those kind of ties? Because of course he's so anti working with other European countries.
Well, he's not. No, he's not. I think that's untrue. I don't think he's anti working with other European countries. I think that's actually a bit of a misnomer, to be honest with you. Nigel, I know him well. He's not a racist. His own familial experience of relationships indicates that. And nor is he stupid, and nor is he unwilling to work with other countries. What he doesn't want to do is have the British sitting on their hands in no small part, because Keir Starmer was instrumental in making this place a soft touch many years ago when he was a lawyer. I won't go into the details, but the Starmer actually helped to create the circumstances that we're suffering now. So I would say that Farage, in answer to your question, Farage is capable of doing it. He has to be very clear. He did say something which is slightly confusing to some people. He said, well, he wouldn't have mass deportation. Perhaps it's a question of nuance, but I think it's really important, if he wants to win on this, and he can, that he's really clear on what he wants to do. What would I give Starmer? If we could give them negative points, it would be negative, because he's completely broken his promise that he made in July 2024. Now, there's another thing. We can carry on that one, but we haven't got that much time. There's another thing which is going on, of course, and that's the NHS is in crisis. And of course, the latest thing is, over recent weeks, we've had a lot of talk about doctors' strikes. Have a watch of this.
Back from the CT scan and everything's clear. So
John is 88. He's an RAF veteran. He was brought here to the Royal Berkshire Hospital after suffering a nasty fall in his garden. It happened just as the hospital was preparing for its resident doctors to go on strike.
I was in the RAF for 30 years, and the military were very loyal. We weren't able to strike. We went and did our duties where the Crown sent us.
Do you have any sympathy for resident doctors and the industrial action they're taking?
Not everything in life is give me when I want it. They are well-respected people of the community, and by doing this action, my feeling is that they're losing the respect to the community, and that is a terrible thing.
The walkout will have a wide-ranging disruptive impact on NHS services across the country.
And that's another problem, because we now see the NHS essentially at war with the government, when, or at least the doctors at war with the government, when the doctors themselves are losing a lot of power, having been given a pretty big pay rise already, and the public getting angry. Why is it that this government hasn't been able to resolve the NHS problems either.
Well, they go much, much wider than the dispute over pay. I mean, let's really analyze what is happening with the NHS at the moment. We have a situation where you will call 999 and horrendously wait maybe 8-9 hours because no ambulance turns up. When the ambulance does turn up and it gets to the A&E department, sometimes there's no room in the department, so you stay outside in a queue of ambulances waiting to get patients inside the A&E department. When you actually do get into the A&E department, there are big signs telling you the wait can be up to 6, 7, 8 hours. If you want to try and see your GP, it's almost impossible to be able to get an appointment coming through. At every level, frankly, this is the biggest example of Britain being broken. Now, look, there are underlying reasons for this. Of course, you can't just blame this on Wes Streeting and the Labour government. This has been happening for years now. An elderly population, we know the bed blocking issue around social care. We know the fact that we can do so much more to keep people alive and people are living longer. We understand these problems. How though can any government tackle the NHS without putting significant more funding in alongside reform? Now, will Nigel Farage tackle that issue? Does he have the passion for the NHS in the same way he has the passion for the issue of immigration?
It's not the central thing that they stand for. The Reform UK proposition is primarily about getting the country back, to use a slightly loose phrase. But they do have to have a policy on this. My feeling is whoever's in government, for exactly the reason that you said, Mark, whoever's in government will suffer, because the longer you make people live, the more they cost. It's simple, stands to reason. And those last weeks or months are phenomenally expensive. Maybe that's why Labour's so keen to have assisted dying. To say to people, look, you're really, really costing us a fortune. Have you ever thought about moving on a little bit sooner?
I think that horrendous, absolutely horrendous thought. But what is interesting, I think, is that I hear
Wait a minute. On that, Mark, I spoke to a very good friend of mine who had a really, really serious condition, really serious, life-threatening. He was in a coma. And they said to his wife, well, we were not going to resuscitate him. He won't have any quality of life if he comes back. And she said, no, you will resuscitate him. I'm not letting you kill him. This actually happened, Mark. I'm only not mentioning the names because it's so personal. And the wife ran around getting second opinions while the hospital was willing to let him die. He's made a recovery. He's having a good life. He's not sitting like a vegetable or paralyzed, but they were ready to let him die. I used to support assisted dying. My father died of motor neuron disease. And I said, even on Question Time, on the BBC Question Time show, that I supported it. But under the current circumstances, I don't trust the current government to do this in anything other than a cynical way.
Okay, well, look, set aside assisted dying, and the passions run high on all sides on that debate at the moment. But I think what's going to be interesting is the dialogue that reform will need to have around the NHS. Now, I hear when I knock on doors, people saying that the reason the NHS is so busy, the reason they can't see a doctor is because of immigration. Now, that's, of course, a ridiculous proposition, and it's an oversimplistic one, but it's one which reform will try and do to link that previous issue we discussed around to imply almost that actually if we can get a grip of immigration, it will also release the burden on the NHS. That doesn't wash with me at all. You need radical, serious changes in the NHS. Now, I think that Farage has talked and may be brave enough to talk about looking at whether or not we should be having small charges in the NHS. Do you want, for example, to charge people for the food they eat in hospital? Could we have a small charge for people to see an NHS doctor? Now, of course, the papers will have a field day on this. We have to protect access for all, free access to the NHS. But somebody's got to talk about hard choices like this. And if it means that we can cut those cancer waiting times, we can cut the A&E waiting times by a small charge imposed for some aspects of access to the NHS, then maybe that's a tough discussion that we have to have. Would Farage be brave enough to do it?
No, I don't agree with your analysis. I know, for reasons I won't go into now, that there aren't just economic migrants, there are health migrants coming here. As an entire industry of people coming here to get better. And you can't blame them for wanting to get better. But if we are increasing our population by 1% per annum, like that's by 700,000 people, it's going to put a strain on the NHS, isn't it? If it carries on like that, that's an increase of 1/10 on the pressure on all of our public services, let alone housing. We won't talk about that today, subject for another time. And I do think that Nigel Farage would be right to say we have a massive problem because there are too many of us, and the us isn't us.
Well, if there's any attempt by you, Lembit or Farage or others, to link the crisis in the NHS to those boats coming over, I mean, that is absolute rubbish. We know that is rubbish.
I'm not talking about the boats. That's 40,000. I'm talking about the other 660,000.
But look at some of the most talented doctors, some of the most talented nurses that we have in this country looking after us as patients, and they come from everywhere across the globe. And that's
but not by boat, not illegally. They don't claim asylum. They come here to work. They fulfill that criterion I said before. They fulfilled the criterion I said before. They've embraced the British culture and they give as much as they get back. That's not what you get with hordes coming here, living in hotels and causing trouble. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on as well. But go on, last word on this.
I want to give my point on this area. So for Wes Streeting, I don't give him a 0 out of 10 on this. I like the guy. I think he's actually quite plain speaking. I think he's got a tough job, but he has the ability, I think, to unite people around this issue. Whether he has the courage to take the tough decisions, I don't know. I will give him a 4 out of 10 and say that the jury is out, and I want to see what he can achieve in the next year. For reform on this issue, I would score them clearly lower because it's not one of their ace cards in the way that immigration is.
I would give Wes Streeting a 4 just so that we don't argue on this anymore, Mark. I think he's probably the least incompetent member of the cabinet and likely to be the next leader of the Labour Party when Starmer inevitably loses that job either next year for very dark reasons or maybe in 4 years' time. But I can't give him more because he hasn't done a good job. He looks smug there, and I suppose that's quite selective as a picture, but he is presiding over strikes that are harming people. But for you to give Farage 4 out of 10, that's not reasonable. We don't know what he would do. We know he would save billions upon billions. We'll talk about borrowing in a minute, and that might help us with that situation. But all right, let's move on because we've got other things to talk about as well. Let's actually talk about the money. Let's talk about the money. You've seen recently Rachel Reeves has now been exposed as having borrowed more than expected. Now, that's on top of growth being lower than expected, unemployment being higher than expected, and inflation being higher than expected. The only thing that's unexpected about this is that she's still in her job.
Yeah,
the only thing, why would anyone think she's any good? On all the key measures, she's failing.
And you haven't added in there the issue of interest rates, for example, which were predicted to come down quite steadily this year, but appear to have halted. The Bank of England are not convinced when they look at what's happening in relation to inflation, which is still, I wouldn't call it raging out of control, but is certainly going in the wrong direction at the moment. So yes, you're absolutely right. If we're analysing broken Britain around immigration and the NHS, it can be a little bit subjective. But when you're analysing whether or not the economy is broken, there are hard facts and figures, and Rachel Reeves cannot dodge those figures. And on every indicator at the moment, she appears to be failing.
Even the potentially quite sympathetic mainstream media have been having a go at her for that. Let's just have a look at this.
Paying for the public services that we all use. And in June, the government borrowed more than £20 billion to make up the shortfall between what it was spending and what it had coming in through taxes and other income. And that's £6 billion more than it had borrowed in the same month last year. It's also the second highest borrowing figure on record for any June except 2020, which was, of course, when all that borrowing was needed during the pandemic. Why has borrowing jumped? Well, the Office for National Statistics says it's because the cost of providing public services has gone up. That's things like health, education, defence, welfare, and so on. That's due to the effect of pay rises, higher costs of goods and services, and a bigger benefits bill. The government also had to pay higher rates of interest on some of its debt.
Which is exactly what you were saying. I mean, in other words, they're failing on everything. If she was in charge of a company, if she was in charge of the accounts company, she'd be fired.
Well, or the shareholders, i.e. the electorate, would certainly get rid of her. And I suspect if there was an election at this particular moment, then she would be one of the main reasons why the Labour government would lose it. But again, let's look at what would reform do. Now, clearly, this is a tricky issue for reform, in my judgment, because we know that parties like Reform tend to make a lot of promises, a lot of claims, and then when you get the various academic institutes analysing whether their sums add up or not, invariably they just do not. And I think there is a credibility issue for Farage. If he is going to go into the next election, he needs to demonstrate that he's not a Liz Truss 2. He's not going to create chaos with a budget which just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I haven't heard enough yet to convince me that he knows exactly what he's going to do in relation to tax, for example. Will he make claims that taxes will not go up? Because his core voters are not going to want to hear that they're going up. But how is he going to balance his books? And also, just one final point, Lembit, the difficulty about Farage is it's Farage. I have no idea who would be the Chancellor, who would be the Foreign Secretary. I have no idea what a Farage cabinet would look like. Farage can't take every single job in cabinet, so we don't have even a shadow Chancellor who we can quiz, who we can get a sense of whether they're going to be credible or not.
Yeah, I think they do need to ensure that they have a full slate. Maybe that's to follow. I agree with you on that. But I don't think this is going to be so much of a problem as you say. And here's why. In my view, they got the extra money because they're going to junk the insanity of net zero, of cutting carbon dioxide emissions. That saves tens of billions a year in actual money, probably more than that, actually.
Now, tell me how that raises money.
Well,
by getting
it's easy.
net zero. Tell me, give me some examples.
Well, I can easily do that. Basically, well, I'm going to give you, just listen, okay? Listen, I'm not annoyed with you. I'm annoyed with the fact that we still continue with this insane policy. We get rid of the idea of burying carbon dioxide. It's just madness. 22,000 million saved straight away. Not every year, but that's a lot saved. We get cheaper energy because we use oil and gas and coal to power our country.
How can they be cheaper when they're so vulnerable to international conflicts taking place?
Coal.
Coal not, but
dig a hole under your house and see what you've got there. You've got coal and gas under your feet. No, well, don't do it now.
Oh,
do it later. Do it later. But
I'll get my spade out straight away after this.
That was uncharacteristically amusing for you, Mark. So we've got coal and gas and oil. And you know the oil we're buying from Norway? It's the oil that we could bring up ourselves. So we've got those resources. Then we don't have to have the most expensive kind of energy there is, wind and solar. Don't let anyone tell you they're free. They're not. They're insanely expensive. And also you have to have a backup for when it's dark and the wind doesn't blow. So we have cheaper energy. That's a huge game changer. Here's another one. We actually don't force people to get rid of their diesel and petrol preferences to have more expensive electric cars. And then there's insulation. Then there's heat pumps. This is all crazy. And there's something else we can do. This is my personal view. We should seriously try and work out why on earth no one's listening to Britain on the world stage anymore, and use some of the money we save from nuclear weapons, which we don't need, and I certainly don't want, to actually make friends with the people that we think are going to attack us. Savings. Doge as well. They have already identified millions in, this is Reform UK, in the organisations that they now run, the local authorities. It's debatable how much it is, but they're out there scrapping stupid policies. So there's specific things that they can do.
Well, now the rant is over, let me just first of all deal with one nonsense idea that because you have wind energy, when the wind doesn't blow, all the power goes out. I mean, try telling that to a country like Denmark. For goodness sake, Lembit, you store that energy, and you know that only so well. Where I do agree
How
with
do
you...
you store it, Mark? How do you store it?
I'm not an you store it. Denmark does not have no... During the winter, or if it doesn't blow windy, Denmark does not shut down, for goodness sake. There are
They
ways...
have spinning reserve. What you use, almost invariably, is gas and maybe nuclear, but you can't turn nuclear on off fast to gas. So what you're doing, you have to have enough. If you have, say, 80 gigawatts capacity, that's roughly what Britain needs at peak. You have to be able to do that without the sun, without the wind. And, oh, incidentally, another thing, Mark, Ed Miliband, blowing wind, he wants to spend 50 million to dim the sun after telling us to get solar panels. That's where you get the money.
I'm going to capture all of your hot air, and I'll be able to run my house for a year on it, Lembit, frankly. Look, let's deal with the issue of whether or not we think that Rachel Reeves should get any points out of 10. For me, it's another 0. I don't believe that there has been anything that she has done which is worthy of a point. But again, as I said to you, until I know who a shadow chancellor is from Reform, until I know what as well, I can't give them any points at all either. It's doom all round when it comes to the economy, and I don't see any political party necessarily coming forward with a viable solution, least of which is Neil Kinnock's idea of a wealth tax, which I think sounds simplistic but is absolutely unrealistic.
It would cost his dad a fortune, but there we go. I would say the same as you, a big 0 for Rachel Reeves. I think she and David Lammy are the two visibly worst performing ministers, apart from the Prime Minister himself. And I do think that you're not right when you say that Farage would have trouble finding the money. I think he would find the money. But okay, let's race on to another thing. And this is directly about what Nigel Farage has been saying. This is a really interesting one. And also how closely you've been following it. There have been repeated protests around a hotel called the Bell Hotel in an area near London called Epping. And this is because of the alleged rape of a local girl by an asylum seeker, an illegal immigrant, basically, who lives there. And the public have had enough. Now, it's still alleged and so forth, but on top of everything else, we then discover that the police appear to have escorted the left wing into the area to demonstrate. And there's a bit of a nuance here again about what exactly the police did, but it's not looking good for the police. Let's listen to the man himself, Nigel Farage, talking about this.
The events at the Bell Hotel in Epping over the weekend became a very major national news story. And it's the usual stuff, of course. It's those vile, awful, horrid, far-right protesters. How dare they be upset that a 14-year-old girl was allegedly sexually assaulted by somebody who'd crossed the English Channel by boat and was staying in that hotel. And it led to local groups, predominantly females, predominantly mums, worried about kids protesting. And yes, it's true, of course, a few far-right thugs turned up. But I learned some things over the last 2 days that led me to put out a video this morning saying I thought it was absolutely astonishing that the police should have bussed a group called Stand Up to Racism, who had within them Antifa, who we know to be an openly violent organisation. What were they doing bussing them from the station to the Bell Hotel? Well, I got a phone call back from a police officer who was in charge of a situation that night to say I was wrong. They didn't bus them to the protest. They walked them to the protest and they bussed them back later. So if I was slightly out on accuracy, I apologise, but I think the gist of what I was saying was right. Did it make any sense to escort those people to a protest? Because as soon as they arrived, that's when the trouble and the violence started. So
no, I think that's a strong suit for Nigel Farage, because a lot of people will feel the same way. I feel the same way. I feel protective of my daughters. And I am really worried about what we're importing into this country. Whatever you say about, oh, well, we need to be sympathetic to these people who are seeking asylum, I have no sympathy for someone who comes into this country and sexually assaults the indigenous population. Do you?
Yeah, Lembit, we have rules and we have ways in which justice is delivered in this country, and it is not done by mob rule. It is not done by people hearing wind of things. Sadly, maybe not in this case, but sadly, many times misinformation. I remember many years ago a pediatrician having his house attacked by protesters because they didn't understand the difference between the word pediatrician and paedophile. We cannot have mob rule deciding.
Oh, okay, hang on. Now you're being sanctimonious because you're walking away from what we just saw there. I agree with you. Maybe we actually agree. We cannot have mob rule. So why did the police walk these protesters into the environment where there was going to be trouble and bust them back? How is that not political? Two-tier policing.
No, because I'm assuming that the police decided that if there was going to be a right to protest, and individuals have a right to protest, it was better that they managed that process rather than it becoming just a free-for-all. So, yeah, you can very easily misinterpret this and swing it to your own advantage and make a spin on it saying the police are incompetent. Policing these issues is hugely complex, and they probably believe that was the best way to try and diffuse the issue and at the same time protect the right for individuals on both sides to protest. But is this an issue where Labour are going to come under difficulties? Now, it's two things quickly to say, Lembit. Starmer's one of his best hours in the job was almost a year ago when he quickly managed to clamp down on these kind of protests. You remember they were happening about a year ago. If, however, things carry on as they are, we could see another summer of these kind of protests happening again. And it's going to be another challenge for Starmer. But I think we all acknowledge that he quickly got a grip of it a year ago. And so on this particular issue, I would actually give him quite a few brownie points, because I think he showed a very, very tough and quick understanding of the issues. And he was very, very quick to make sure that a lot of people were arrested and publicly given quite serious sentences for what they were doing.
I can't believe you're saying this, Mark. What's happened to you?
You agreed with me. I'm sure you agreed with me at the time on this.
I never agreed with you. I was insanely angry about this. I was absolutely livid. There's a woman called Lucy Connolly who said something stupid on the social networks, took it down and apologized, and she's doing time. Meanwhile, Ricky Jones, who was then a Labour councillor, who said of the far right, we should cut their throats and get rid of them. He still hasn't been tried. And you don't think there's two-tier policing? Hurty words on the internet gets you banged up. Standing with a loudspeaker in front of a live audience and saying cut their throats, and he's still walking free? No, I don't accept. And I don't accept that you're right in any way to exonerate Keir Starmer or give him a spit of positivity on this, because we were lied to. We were lied to. Oh, Axel Ruda Cabana. It's not a very common Welsh name, is it? As common as Lembit Öpik, maybe. And we were told, oh, he was born in Wales. Clearly, we were being told he was meant to be Welsh. And that was a lie. And secondly, he had nothing to do with terrorism. Turns out that he had a close association with terrorism. And you're taking Starmer's side, Yvette Cooper's side? Come on.
I am. I absolutely am. And I'll tell you for why. Because there was a 48-hour period where various cities were starting to get out of control. 7 o'clock at night time, there were riots taking place. The police were struggling to keep control. And we could have very, very easily gone through weeks and weeks of those riots and protests, wrecking property, wrecking individual people's businesses and lives. And instead, Starmer and Cooper got a grip of it incredibly quickly, took a tough stance. And in fact, within minutes of those high sentences being given, those riots stopped. They got a grip of it and they stopped the country falling out of control last summer. So absolutely. On that, well, the facts are there. The riots stopped.
That's not facts. What they did was they ruined the relationship between the police and the public. What we're going to see is vigilantism. That's what's happening in Epping when the police are apparently taking the side of the left.
They protected the public and they stopped our streets getting out of control. And that was the good and the right thing to do. The question is it going to happen again this summer? Well,
I think we need to do a whole show on that separately. And I know somebody who's been attending the Epping demonstrations. I will bring a witness, and you can bring one too. And we'll have a four-way on this one. I'm probably more opposed to what you said there than I've ever been on any show that we've done in this series. But we'll come back to that. And I'm actually genuinely pretty angry about the whole situation.
But look, I think we need to wrap this up with an overall score. An overall
okay,
score.
well, just a score. I would give them 0 out of 10. What would you give them for their policing?
I actually think on this issue, I would score them the highest. I think that actually they seem to be getting rid of it. I think Yvette Cooper seems to be quite a competent Home Secretary. I would give them a 5 or a 6 on this issue.
Okay. All right. Okay. Final thing before we wrap up. Can reform do it? Well, overall, I think this is the worst government ever. I'll give them 1 because West Streeting maybe isn't absolutely terrible. Maybe I haven't spotted some potential talent there. What would you give them overall?
I mean, for the Labour Party overall at this stage, I would say it's a 3 out of 10. But I want to just make another comment before we talk about reform. Labour are 3 out of 10. The so-called official opposition, the Conservatives, are 2 out of 10. There is no official opposition. The Lib Dems with their 72 MPs need to punch more, in my judgment. But I would sell that they're there and that they're active and they're taking these issues up, but they're very silent in the media, and that may not be their fault. But it's all about reform. And so from a reform perspective, I would give them an 8 out of 10. They are in the media. They seem to be hitting the right messages at the right time. They seem to be acting like the official opposition, even though they only got a handful of MPs. And they seem at the moment, if you believe the opinion polls, to be heading towards very serious contenders at the next election.
I roughly agree with your vote for the Tories there, your score, because they're out of it. They're basically heading for oblivion for at least one general election and possibly indefinitely. The Lib Dems, just invisible for reasons we discussed before. Can't open that up just now. Give them 2, but actually no, I'll give them 4 because they got 72 and they still look less bad than Labour. And overall, Labour, as I say, I'll just give them 1. Now reform, I do give them 8, like you. And it doesn't matter what I say. There was a by-election, very important figure. Whatever we think, let's finish on the numbers. There's a by-election with that chap there, Alan Cook, standing next to Nigel Farage. He stood, and that was in a by-election in London, and he won. That man, that chap there, he actually won. And those are the figures. I won't. Let's not go into the details. I'm putting it there so you can freeze frame it if you're watching it afterwards. But Alan Cook basically got about 1,300 votes, and the Conservatives got 1,200, and nobody else was in the game. But here's the thing. The Conservatives went down from 42% to 29%. Reform went from 0% to 34%, which is actually more or less the figures that we see in the polls. So whatever you and I think, this was landmark. Alan Cook is the first Reform candidate in the whole of London's local elections to win, not to defect, but to actually win. So those figures, real figures and real ballot boxes, 28%, wasn't a high turnout, but it's significant. About 4,000 people voted, would suggest that reform can be the next government, Mark.
I mean, look, the figures, both in terms of the polls and what's happening in the by-elections, are compelling, and they do make a very strong case for reform. I have to say that actually there have been quite a few by-elections where the Lib Dems have been able to see off reform. I want to discuss this in a future programme because we've talked about Labour and we've talked about reform. I want to actually focus a little bit on the party that I love and care about and you used to love and care about, and actually how they position themselves in this potentially very, very open election. So maybe we can park that for the next program and talk about them. But in the meantime, there's one clear lesson from all of this, everything we've talked about, that it is really all up for grabs. And this is going to be the most fascinating 3-4 years in a run up to a general election that we've ever had.
And for the first time, Mark, I can almost say, look into my eyes, come to reform. Reform. You could be there. You could finish what you started, Mark, and get onto the cabinet.
Never in a month of Sundays? What's the phrase? Why is it a month of Sundays? Anyway, it ain't happening.
That's 30 months. It's not that long. And it's actually less time than up to the next general election. Hope springs eternal.
Look, thanks for the go. I'm gonna start digging for this coal and oil under my ground. So lovely chatting to you, Lembit. I'll let you know if I find anything.
Good to see you. Thanks very much. Hope you found that interesting. I'm Lembit Öpik.
And I'm Mark Oaten.
And we'll come back to a lot of that. Have your say, go to X or YouTube. You'll find us there as well. filmed as live and available always as live as well. Let us know your views. Big thanks to Mark for being here with me. Big thanks to the team, but more than anything, thanks to yourselves. The numbers are going up. We hope you like the service. So we'll be back quite soon with another edition of, what's it called again?
Oh, for goodness sake, pay attention. A Very Liberal Life. Repeat
All
it
right.
after me.
I'll practice for next time.